The glass didn't break, it just slipped from his hand, quietly, like everything else in his life, falling apart without a sound. The apartment on West 82nd Street was too quiet. Adrian Cole stood in the doorway for a moment longer than usual, his hand still resting on the cold brass knob. It was nearly 10:30 p.m. late, even by Manhattan standards, but the silence felt different tonight. Not peaceful, not empty, controlled. He stepped inside, placing his leather briefcase gently on the console table. No echo of footsteps from the bedroom. No faint hum of Vanessa's voice on a call. No music drifting from the kitchen like she used to play on nights when she cooked. Just stillness. "Vanessa?" he called out. No answer. Adrian loosened his tie, his movement slow, deliberate. He had spent the last 12 hours negotiating a corporate merger worth 9 figures, yet the unease crawling under his skin now felt heavier than any deal he had ever handled. He walked toward the kitchen. The lights were off, but something caught his eye. A wine glass on the counter, half full. Lipstick stain. Vanessa didn't leave unfinished wine. Not like that. He picked it up, studying it. His mind tried to dismiss it. Maybe she got distracted. Maybe she stepped out for a moment. But something deeper, quieter, refused to let it go. A small detail, but details mattered. They always had. Adrian set the glass down exactly where it was. Then he noticed something else. 2 sets of footprints on the polished floor, faint, nearly invisible unless you were looking for them, one larger than the other. His jaw tightened. "Don't jump to conclusions," he murmured to himself. But his body had already started reacting. His breathing slowed, his shoulders squared. His mind, trained for years in law and strategy, shifted into something sharper. Observation mode. He moved through the apartment, each step quieter than the last. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open, empty. The bed was made, but not perfectly. The sheets had been adjusted in a way Vanessa never did. She was meticulous, almost obsessive about symmetry. This wasn't her. This was rushed. A flicker of something, anger, fear, disbelief, rose in his chest, but Adrian suppressed it instantly. Emotion was noise, and noise blurred truth. He turned toward the closet. One of Vanessa's dresses was missing, the black silk one she wore only for important evenings. The kind she claimed were always work-related. Adrian exhaled slowly. "Work," he repeated under his breath. For the first time, the word sounded hollow. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Vanessa. "Vanessa, running late. Don't wait up." Adrian stared at the screen. The message wasn't unusual. It should have been normal, routine, but tonight it felt like a script, pre-written. He typed a response, then stopped, deleted it. Silence was better. Silence revealed more. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Manhattan glowed beneath him, alive, indifferent, endless. Somewhere out there, his wife was with someone else. The thought landed, but didn't explode. Not yet. Because Adrian Cole didn't react without certainty, and he didn't act without control. Behind him, the apartment remained perfectly still, like a stage waiting for the next scene. But something had already shifted. A line had been crossed. And though Adrian didn't fully understand it yet, he felt it. This wasn't just distance. This wasn't just a bad night. This was the beginning of something much darker. He picked up the wine glass again, staring at the faint lipstick mark. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he noticed something else. A second imprint, barely visible. Not hers. Adrian set the glass down carefully, too carefully. His reflection in the window no longer looked like a husband waiting for his wife. It looked like a man preparing for something. Something precise. Something inevitable. And somewhere in the city, someone was about to make a mistake they would never recover from. Something worse was coming. The rain started just after midnight. Not heavy, not dramatic. Just a thin, steady drizzle that blurred the city lights into something softer, almost forgiving. Adrian Cole sat in the dark living room, untouched whiskey resting in his hand. He hadn't turned on a single light. The apartment remained exactly as it had been when he arrived, undisturbed, preserved, like a crime scene waiting to be understood. Vanessa still wasn't home. He didn't text again, didn't call, didn't move. Time passed differently when you start reacting to it. Minutes stretched, sounds sharpened, thoughts clarified. At 12:47 a.m., the front door finally clicked open. Adrian didn't turn around. He listened. The soft sound of heels slipping off. The faint rustle of fabric. Vanessa's breathing slightly uneven, like she had walked too fast or done something else entirely. "You're still up?" she asked. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Adrian took a slow sip of whiskey before answering. "Couldn't sleep." A pause. Then she stepped further inside. "You should have texted me. I told you not to wait." Not wait. The words settled between them like something rehearsed. Adrian finally turned his head slightly, just enough to catch a reflection in the window. Her hair was looser than usual. Lipstick, slightly smudged. But her expression? Perfectly composed. "I didn't think it mattered," he said. Another pause. This one longer. Vanessa studied him. He could feel it, even without looking directly at her. The way she assessed people, measured them, was one of the things that had once drawn him in. Now it felt like standing in front of a mirror that showed nothing back. "I had a client dinner," she said, walking toward the kitchen. "It ran late." Adrian nodded once, slowly. "Of course it did." "I left you some food," she added. "I'm not hungry." The refrigerator opened, closed, routine. Everything sounded normal, except it wasn't. Adrian stood up, finally turning to face her fully. For a brief second, their eyes met. Hers were unreadable, not guilty, not nervous, just distant, like he was no longer part of the equation. "You're wet," he said, glancing at her coat. "It's raining." Another silence, but this one was heavier, because now Adrian wasn't just noticing details, he was connecting them. Vanessa moved past him without another word, heading toward the bedroom. Her shoulder brushed his lightly familiar, intimate, and yet completely empty. The door closed behind her. Adrian remained standing in the middle of the room, still, silent, listening. And then, a faint vibration, not his phone. He turned. Vanessa's purse sat on the edge of the counter. It vibrated again, once, twice. Adrian stared at it. For a moment he didn't move, because something inside him already knew. And once you knew, there was no going back. He walked over slowly, each step deliberate, controlled. The phone inside the purse lit up faintly, the screen glowing through the thin leather. A name appeared. Marcus. Adrian's hand froze. Not because he didn't recognize the name, but because he did. Too well. Marcus Hale, best man at their wedding. The one who knew every version of Adrian before success, before Manhattan, before everything. The one person he had never questioned, until now. The phone stopped vibrating. The screen went dark. Adrian didn't pick it up. Not yet. His jaw tightened slightly, but his face remained composed. Because emotions could lie, but evidence didn't. He waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then the phone lit up again. "Marcus, did you get home safe?" A second message appeared almost immediately. "I miss you already." Something inside Adrian shifted. Not shattered, not exploded. Just shifted. Like a lock clicking into place. He reached into the purse and pulled the phone out. The passcode screen appeared. He stared at it. Vanessa had never hidden her phone before. Never needed to. Because trust had always been assumed. He entered her birthday. Wrong. A pause. Then he tried something else. Their wedding date. Unlocked. Of course. A bitter trace of something flickered behind his eyes, but disappeared just as quickly. He opened the messages. The thread with Marcus was pinned at the top. Thousands of messages. Photos. Voice notes. Fragments of a life he had never been part of. Adrian didn't scroll immediately. He just stood there, staring at the screen. Because the proof he had been avoiding was now undeniable. He tapped the most recent photo. Vanessa, in that black silk dress, laughing. Her hand on Marcus's chest. His hand. Lower. Too familiar. Too intimate. Adrian's grip tightened slightly around the phone, but that was the only reaction. No rage, no outburst, just stillness. He scrolled. More photos. Hotel rooms, mirrors, half-finished wine glasses. The same lipstick mark, the same pattern, the same lie, repeated over and over again. And then a voice note, sent 3 hours ago. Adrian hesitated, then pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the silence, soft, unfiltered, different. "I can't keep pretending with him, Marcus. I feel like I'm suffocating. He doesn't see me anymore. With you, I feel alive." The pause, the quiet laugh. "I deserve this. I deserve you." The recording ended. Adrian didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. Because in that moment, something far worse than betrayal revealed itself. Not just what she had done, but what she believed. He locked the phone and placed it back into her purse exactly as it had been. Every angle, every detail, perfect, like nothing had been touched. From the hallway, the sound of running water echoed faintly. Vanessa was in the shower, washing away the night, or trying to. Adrian walked back to the window. The rain had gotten heavier. The city lights were almost completely blurred now. He rested his hand against the glass. Cold, steady, grounding. Marcus. The name repeated in his mind, but it no longer carried warmth, only clarity. Pieces began aligning. Late meetings, unanswered calls, the subtle shifts in Vanessa's behavior, the casual mentions of Marcus's name. Too casual, too normal. Adrian exhaled slowly. Years of trust, reduced to patterns he had simply chosen not to see. Behind him, the water stopped. The bathroom door creaked open. Footsteps approached. "Adrian?" Vanessa's voice called softly. He didn't turn. "Are you coming to bed?" A beat. Then he answered. In a minute. His voice was calm, perfectly calm, because the man she thought she knew was already gone. And in his place was someone else entirely. Someone patient, someone precise, someone who now understood exactly what needed to be done. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the city. Low, distant, but coming closer. And neither Vanessa nor Marcus had any idea they had just stepped into something they would never escape. Something worse was coming. Morning arrived without warmth. The light that filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows felt parasterile, almost artificial. Manhattan moved as it always did, relentless, efficient, indifferent to the quiet destruction unfolding behind glass walls. Adrian Cole stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee with the same steady precision he applied to everything in his life. Nothing about him suggested a man who has spent the night dismantling the truth piece by piece. Nothing, except the silence. Vanessa entered a few minutes later, dressed in a fitted cream blouse and tailored trousers. Impeccable, controlled, untouched by consequence. "Morning," she said, reaching for her phone on the counter. Adrian glanced at her, just once. "Morning." Their voices were neutral, professional, like two people sharing space, not a life. She checked her phone immediately, a habit he had seen countless times before, but now every micro-expression mattered. The slight lift of her lips, the softness in her eyes, not for him, never for him. "You have call today?" she asked casually, scrolling. What time?" 9. A pause. Vanessa nodded, but didn't look up. "I have meetings all day, probably late again." "Of course." Adrian took a slow sip of coffee. "Client dinners?" Her fingers stilled, just for a fraction of a second, then resumed. Something like that. There it was, a lie so polished it almost sounded like truth. Almost. Adrian set his cup down gently. "Drive safe." Vanessa looked up at that, studied him. There was something in his tone she couldn't quite place. Not suspicion, not accusation, just distance. "Always do," she replied, but for the first time there was a flicker of uncertainty behind her composure. Adrian picked up his briefcase and left without another word. Later that day, Marcus Hale leaned back in his office chair, staring at the Manhattan skyline like it belonged to him, because soon it would, or at least that's what he believed. The office was quiet, glass walls, minimalist design, the kind of environment built for power and perception. His reflection stared back at him from the polished surfaces, confident, controlled, winning. His phone buzzed. Vanessa. A slow smile spread across his face as he answered. "Hey." Her voice was softer now, warmer than it had been that morning. "Are you free tonight?" she asked. "For you? Always." A brief silence, then she exhaled. "I can't keep doing this halfway, Marcus." His expression shifted slightly, sharper. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she hesitated, but only briefly. "I'm tired of pretending. I go home and it feels like I'm disappearing, like I don't exist in that apartment anymore." Marcus leaned forward, interest piqued. "And with me?" he asked. "With you," she said quietly, "I feel seen." The words hung between them, dangerous, convincing, exactly what he wanted to hear. "You are seen," Marcus replied smoothly. "Adrian just doesn't know how to appreciate what he has." Vanessa didn't respond immediately, because somewhere, deep beneath the layers of justification, there was still a fragment of truth. But she buried it quickly. "He had his chance," she said, her tone hardening. "I gave him years, Marcus. Years of trying to be enough for someone who never really looked at me." Marcus's eyes darkened, not with empathy, but with calculation. "He's comfortable," Marcus said. "Men like Adrian, they stop trying when they think they've already won." Vanessa let out a quiet laugh, bitter. He didn't win anything. And just like that, the narrative solidified. Not betrayal, not wrongdoing, but liberation. "I deserve more than that life," she added softly. Marcus didn't hesitate. "You deserve everything." And for a moment, they both believed it. Because when two guilty people share the same lie, it starts to feel like truth. Across the city, Adrian sat in his office, reviewing documents that had nothing to do with the case in front of him. Numbers, transactions, names. Marcus Hare's name appeared more often than it should have. That alone wasn't enough. But Adrian didn't deal in assumptions. He dealt in proof. He leaned back slightly, replaying the voice note in his mind. Not the words, but the tone. Vanessa's tone. Alive. That was the word she used. "With you, I feel alive." Adrian closed his eyes briefly, not in pain, but in recognition. He hadn't lost her overnight. He had lost her slowly, quietly, piece by piece, and he had let it happen. But that realization didn't break him. It sharpened him. He opened a secure folder on his laptop. Inside were files he had started compiling just hours ago. Screenshots, timestamps, patterns. Now he added something new. Financial records. Marcus's firm had been involved in several questionable transactions over the past year. Subtle discrepancies, small enough to avoid attention, but consistent, intentional. Adrian's fingers moved across the keyboard with calm efficiency, tracing, connecting, building. This wasn't just an affair. This was leverage. And leverage was power. That night, Vanessa stood in front of the mirror in a hotel suite downtown. The black silk dress clung to her like a second skin. Marcus stood behind her, adjusting his cufflinks. "You look like trouble," he said. She smirked faintly. "I thought you liked trouble." "I like winning." Their eyes met in the mirror, and in that reflection, they looked like something real, something inevitable. But illusions always do. "You ever think about what happens when he finds out?" Marcus asked casually. Vanessa didn't hesitate. "He won't." "You're that sure?" She turned to face him fully, her expression calm, almost cold. "Adrian doesn't look for things he doesn't want to see." A beat. Then she added, quieter, "And even if he did, he wouldn't understand." That was the most dangerous lie of all. Not just underestimating him, but rewriting who he was. Marcus studied her, then smiled. "Then we're safe." Safe. The word settled into the room like a fragile promise. Vanessa stepped closer, her hand resting against his chest. "We're more than safe," she whispered. They kissed, and for a moment the world outside didn't exist. No consequences, no truth, just the illusion they had built together. Back in the apartment, Adrian stood in the dark once again. Same position, same silence. But everything had changed. On the table in front of him lay a neatly organized set of documents, proof of the affair, initial traces of financial misconduct, and something else. A plan, not fully formed yet, but taking shape, precise, unavoidable. He picked up his phone and opened Marcus's contact. His thumb hovered over the call button. Then, slowly, he locked the screen. Not yet, because timing was everything, and Adrian Cole had no intention of wasting his first move. Behind him, the city pulsed with life, unaware, unforgiving, and somewhere within it, two people believed they were untouchable. Adrian's gaze hardened, just slightly, not with anger, but with certainty, because illusions don't shatter all at once. They crack, slowly, silently, until there's nothing left to hold them together. And when that moment came, it wouldn't be loud, it wouldn't be chaotic, it would be precise, final, and devastating. Something worse was coming. The first crack wasn't loud. It never was. It appeared quietly buried inside numbers no one else would question. Adrian Cole sat alone in a private conference room, the glass walls dimmed for privacy. His laptop screen reflected faintly in his eyes, lines of financial data scrolling with clinical precision. To anyone else, it was just another audit trail. To Adrian, it was a pattern. And patterns didn't lie. He zoomed in on a series of transactions tied to one of Marcus Hale's high-profile clients, a real estate investment group that had recently surged in value. The numbers were clean on the surface, structured, legal, but beneath that structure, something was off. Subtle transfers, layered accounts, timing that felt engineered. Adrian leaned back slightly, his fingers steepled together. "This isn't sloppy," he murmured. It was deliberate, careful, confident, which made it worse, because it meant Marcus didn't think he would get caught. Or worse, he believed he was untouchable. Adrian's gaze hardened just a fraction. That belief was about to become his greatest mistake. Later that evening, the restaurant overlooked the Hudson dim lighting, quiet conversations, the kind of place where secrets blended easily into the background. Vanessa sat across from Marcus, a glass of red wine in her hand. She looked relaxed, more relaxed than she ever did at home. "Tell me again why you're nervous," Marcus said, watching her closely. "I'm not nervous," she replied smoothly. He smirked. "You've checked your phone 6 times in the last 10 minutes. Vanessa set it down. Habit or guilt? Her eyes lifted to meet his. Cold, sharp. "Don't," she said. Marcus raised his hand slightly in mock surrender. "Relax, I'm joking." But he wasn't. Not entirely. Because somewhere beneath their carefully constructed illusion, tension was beginning to seep in. "You worry too much," Vanessa added, taking a sip of wine. "Adrian is predictable. He lives in his world, his rules. He doesn't deviate." Marcus studied her. "And you're sure he hasn't noticed anything?" Vanessa didn't hesitate. "No." The certainty in her voice was absolute, convincing, even to herself. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Good, because things are moving faster than I expected." Vanessa's expression shifted. "Faster how?" He hesitated. Just for a second, then smiled. "Opportunities, bigger clients, more capital. It's nothing you need to worry about." That was the moment, small, almost invisible, but Vanessa caught it, the hesitation, the deflection, and suddenly something didn't feel as controlled as it used to. What aren't you telling me? She asked quietly. Marcus exhaled, leaning back. It's complicated. I don't like that answer. He ran a hand through his hair, weighing his options. Then, finally, there are some aggressive strategies involved, he admitted. Short-term movements, reallocations. Vanessa frowned slightly. That sounds like a polished way of saying something illegal. It's not illegal, Marcus said quickly. Then added, softer, not exactly. Silence. The kind that stretched just long enough to matter. Vanessa stared at him, processing, calculating. Because this was different. This wasn't just about her marriage anymore. This had consequences, real ones. Does Adrian know? She asked. Marcus laughed under his breath. Adrian barely notices his own wife, Vanessa. You think he's digging through my financials? The words were meant to reassure, but they didn't. Not completely. Because deep down, Vanessa knew something Marcus didn't. Adrian always noticed. He just didn't react. And that was far more dangerous. Still, she pushed the thought away. Because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging something else. That she might have made a mistake. And Vanessa didn't believe in mistakes. Only choices. I don't want to know details, she said finally. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's not like you. It is now. Her tone was firm, controlled, deliberate. Because distance created safety. And if she didn't know everything, she couldn't be held accountable, right? Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fine. But something had shifted. Not just between them, within them. Because the illusion they shared required trust. And trust didn't survive secrets for long. Across the city, Adrian stood outside Marcus's office building, watching the reflection of the city ripple across its glass surface. He didn't go inside. He didn't need to. Everything he needed was already falling into place. He had spent the last 48 hours tracing Marcus's financial movements. What started as suspicion had become certainty. Layered shell accounts, misrepresented assets, carefully timed transfers designed to disappear into legitimate transactions. It was sophisticated. Enough to fool regulators, enough to fool clients, but not enough to fool Adrian. Because Marcus had made one critical mistake. He assumed no one would look closely enough. Adrian pulled out his phone and opened a secure file. Inside, everything. Every discrepancy, every inconsistency, every lie, hidden beneath numbers. This wasn't just misconduct. This was fraud. And once exposed, it wouldn't just ruin Marcus. It would erase him. Professionally, socially, legally. Adrian locked the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. His expression remained calm, unchanged. But inside, the strategy was evolving. Because this was no longer about catching a cheating wife. This was about dismantling something much larger. Something that required patience, precision, timing. Later that night, Vanessa returned home earlier than usual. The apartment lights were already on. Adrian sat in the living room, reading. Calm, collected. Exactly as always. You're home early, he said without looking up. Dinner got cancelled, she replied, placing her bag down. A lie, but smoother now. More practiced. Adrian nodded slightly. That happens. Vanessa watched him. Something about him felt different. Not distant, not cold, just unreadable. Adrian, she said suddenly. He looked up. Yes? For a moment she hesitated, because there was a question forming in her mind, a dangerous one. Do you know? But she didn't ask it. Instead, do you ever feel like things change without you noticing? Adrian held her gaze. A beat passed, then another. Yes, he said quietly, all the time. The answer unsettled her, more than it should have. She forced a small smile. I guess that's life. Is it? Adrian asked. His tone wasn't accusatory, but it wasn't neutral either. Vanessa looked away first. Good night, she said, turning toward the bedroom. Good night. The door closed behind her. Adrian remained still for a moment, then slowly closed the book in his hands. He hadn't read a single page, because his focus wasn't on stories anymore. It was on outcomes. And now, the stakes were clear. This wasn't just betrayal, it was corruption, deception, and a chain of decisions that would inevitably lead to collapse. Vanessa thought she could stand at the edge without falling. Marcus thought he could control the system without consequence. They were both wrong. And Adrian was the only one who could see exactly how this would end. He leaned back slightly, eyes drifting toward the closed bedroom door. Not with anger, not with sadness, but with something far more dangerous. Clarity. Because once you understood the full truth, there was no hesitation left, only execution. And when it came, it wouldn't just break them, it would expose them. Completely. Irreversibly. Something worse was coming. The shift was invisible. That was the most dangerous part. No raised voices, no confrontations, no accusations, just adjustments. Adrian's call began with something simple: availability, or rather, its absence. For years, Adrian had been predictable, structured, reliable to the point of invisibility. Vanessa always knew where he would be, what time he would return, how he would respond. Now, she didn't. On Tuesday, he came home late without explanation. On Wednesday, he cancelled dinner plans calmly, without apology. On Thursday, he didn't text her at all, not once. Vanessa noticed. Of course she did. But instead of suspicion, she felt something else. Freedom. Thursday night. Vanessa stood in front of the mirror again, adjusting an earring. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed behind her, watching. "You're smiling more lately," he said. She caught her own reflection. He was right. "I feel lighter," she replied. "Because of me?" She turned, a faint smirk forming. "Don't make it about you," Marcus chuckled. "Everything's about me." But he didn't miss the shift either. Adrian's absence wasn't raising alarms. It was removing pressure, creating space, and in that space, Vanessa felt justified. "He hasn't even asked where I've been," she added. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That easy, huh?" Vanessa shrugged slightly. "He checked out a long time ago." The statement came effortlessly, too effortlessly, because repeating something often enough made it feel like truth. "He doesn't fight for you," Marcus said. "He's stone smooth, persuasive. That tells you everything." Vanessa didn't respond immediately, because there was a time when Adrian had fought, when he had noticed, when he had cared in ways that weren't loud but were real. But those memories felt distant now, muted, irrelevant. "He had his chance," she said finally. Marcus stood, walking toward her slowly. "And now?" Vanessa met his gaze. "Now I'm choosing myself." That was the narrative. Clean, empowering, convenient, and completely built on selective memory. Marcus smiled, satisfied. Because as long as she believed that, she wouldn't question anything else. Across the city, Adrian sat in a quiet bar downtown, nursing a drink he barely touched. This wasn't his usual environment. That was intentional. Everything was. His phone lay face down on the table. Next to it, a second phone. Untraceable, temporary, useful. He picked it up and typed a short message. Sent. Then waited. Not for a reply, but for movement. Because control wasn't about force. It was about influence. And influence required patience. The next day. Office. Marcus frowned at his screen. The transaction had been delayed. Not denied, not flagged, just delayed. Which was worse. Because delays created attention. And attention created questions. He leaned back, tension creeping into his posture. "That's strange," he muttered. One of his associates approached. "Something wrong?" Marcus shook his head. "Probably just a system lag." But it didn't feel like that, because Marcus didn't believe in coincidence, and something about this felt intentional. Later that afternoon, Vanessa sat in a glass-walled conference room, half listening to a presentation. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. No message, just silence. She frowned slightly, then realized what was bothering her. Adrian hadn't texted all day, not even a routine check-in. Nothing. A small, almost imperceptible discomfort settled in her chest. Not guilt, not concern, just disruption. Because control wasn't only about presence, it was also about absence. And Adrian's silence was starting to feel unfamiliar. She quickly dismissed it, focused back on the meeting. Because this, her career, her independence, was what mattered. Not him, not anymore. That evening, the apartment felt different again. But this time, Vanessa noticed it. Adrian was already home, sitting at the dining table with his laptop open. Working, focused, unbothered. "You're early," she said. "Wrapped up faster than expected." She placed her back down slowly, watching him, waiting. For something. A question, a glance, a reaction. Nothing came. "You didn't text today," she said casually. Adrian didn't look up. "Did I need to?" The question landed harder than it should have. Vanessa crossed her arms slightly. "No, I just noticed." Silence followed, heavy, uncomfortable, but not for him. Adrian finally looked up, his expression calm. "Is something wrong?" The irony was surgical. Vanessa hesitated, because suddenly, she didn't know how to answer that. "No," she said, "everything's fine." Adrian held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then nodded. "Good," and returned to his work. Conversation over, just like that. Vanessa turned away, a faint tension tightening in her chest. Because something had shifted. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough. Enough to make her feel unseen. Late night Adrian stood on the balcony, the city stretching endlessly before him. Behind him, Vanessa slept. Or pretended to. It didn't matter. His phone buzzed. The second phone. A message appeared. Unknown contact. Transfer flagged again. Internal review likely. Adrian read it once. Then deleted it. Step 1. Complete. Not exposure. Not yet. Just pressure. Because pressure revealed cracks. And cracks revealed truth. He exhaled slowly, his gaze steady. Vanessa thought he was oblivious. Marcus thought he was untouchable. Both assumptions were necessary. Because the more comfortable they felt, the more careless they would become. And carelessness was the beginning of collapse. Adrian slipped the phone back into his pocket. His reflection in the glass was almost unrecognizable now. Not broken, not angry. Just precise, controlled, waiting. Because the game had already begun. They just didn't know it yet. And when they finally realized it, would be too late to stop anything. Too late to fix anything. Too late to escape. Behind him, inside the apartment, Vanessa shifted slightly in bed. Restless. Not because she knew the truth, but because somewhere deep inside, she could feel it. Something was changing. Something she couldn't control. Something that didn't follow her rules. And for the first time, the illusion she had built with Marcus flickered. Just for a second. But it was enough. Because illusions don't collapse all at once. They weaken. Quietly. Until the moment they don't exist anymore. And when that moment came, there would be no warning. No mercy. No way back. Something worse was coming. Control, when executed correctly, didn't look like power. It looked like normalcy. Adrian Cole began asking questions. Not accusations. Not confrontations. Just questions. And that made them far more dangerous. Monday evening. Vanessa was halfway through her wine when Adrian spoke. Do you ever lie to make things easier? The question came out of nowhere. Soft. Measured. Vanessa didn't look up immediately. What kind of question is that? The kind people avoid answering honestly. She set her glass down slowly, eyes lifting to meet his. Everyone lies, Adrian. It's part of life. Is it? Yes. Her tone was firm, certain, rehearsed. Adrian nodded slightly, as if considering it. And when does it stop being a convenience, he asked quietly, and start becoming something else? Vanessa felt it then, a subtle tightening in her chest. Not fear, not yet, but something close. I don't know what you're trying to get at, she said. I'm not trying to get at anything. A pause, then he added, I'm just trying to understand how people justify things they know are wrong. Silence. Thick. Uncomfortable. Vanessa let out a small breath, leaning back in her chair. Maybe they don't think it's wrong, she said. Adrian's gaze didn't shift. Or maybe they've just gotten used to telling themselves that. Their eyes locked, and for a moment it felt like standing on the edge of something. Vanessa looked away first. I'm not having this conversation, she said, standing up. Adrian didn't stop her. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't push. Because he didn't need to. The question had already done its job. Across the city, Marcus Hale stared at his laptop screen for the third time in 10 minutes. Same numbers, same issue. Another delay, another internal flag. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping in. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. His assistant hovered near the door. Compliance asked for clarification on the last transfer. Marcus's jaw tightened. On what grounds? They said the timing looked irregular. Irregular. That word again. Marcus leaned back, forcing himself to breathe evenly. Fix it, he said. Adjust the documentation. Make it clean. We already did. A pause. Then, they're asking for deeper verification. That was new. That wasn't routine. That was attention. And the tension was dangerous. Marcus dismissed her with a sharp nod, waiting until the door closed before exhaling. Something was off. Not wrong enough to panic, but wrong enough to notice. And Marcus noticed everything. He picked up his phone, scrolled, paused on Adrian's name. For a brief second, a thought crossed his mind. Then he laughed under his breath. No, he muttered. Impossible. Adrian wasn't that kind of man. Predictable, structured, safe. Marcus put the phone down, but the thought didn't disappear. It lingered, quiet, persistent. That night, apartment. Vanessa stepped out of the shower, wrapping a towel around herself. The bedroom was dim. Adrian sat in the armchair by the window, reading, or at least, holding a book. You are still awake, she said. Couldn't sleep. She moved toward the dresser, avoiding his gaze. Something about him felt heavier lately. Not aggressive, not distant, just present, in a way he hadn't been before. You've been different, she said suddenly. Adrian turned the page calmly. Different how? I don't know, quieter. I've always been quiet. Not like this. That made him look up. Their eyes met. Do you want me to talk more? He asked. The question was simple, but it wasn't, because Vanessa didn't know how to answer it. No, she said quickly, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She hesitated, because now she felt it clearly. That shift, that imbalance, like she was the one being observed. She exhaled, frustrated. I feel like you're somewhere else lately. Adrian studied her, carefully. You said something the other day, he said, about things changing without noticing. Vanessa stiffened slightly. Yes,
I think you were right. A bit.
Then, but I don't think they change without reason. The words landed slowly, deliberately. Vanessa crossed her arms, defensive now. What are you implying? Nothing, Adrian. I'm just paying attention. Silence. The kind of pressed in from all sides. Vanessa's heart rate ticked up slightly, because suddenly, this didn't feel like distance anymore. It felt like proximity. Too close, too aware. Paying attention to what? She asked. Adrian held her gaze, for a long moment. Then, to what's real? The answer was quiet, but it cut deeper than anything louder ever could. Vanessa looked away again, because for the first time, she wasn't sure what he knew. An uncertainty was something she couldn't control. Later that night, Marcus poured himself a drink he didn't need. The apartment felt smaller than usual, tighter. He checked his email again. Nothing new, which was worse, because silence meant something was building. He grabbed his phone and dialed Vanessa. She answered on the third ring. Hey, she said. You hear anything from Adrian? Marcus asked. A pause. No, why? Just asking, you sound tense. I'm not. She didn't believe him. What's going on? Marcus hesitated. Then, some of my accounts are getting flagged. Vanessa frowned. Flagged how? Internal review. Nothing serious. But it's happening more than it should. Silence. Vanessa's grip tightened slightly on the phone. Could it trace back to you? No. Too fast, too certain, which made it less convincing. Marcus, it's under control, he said firmly. Another pause. Then she asked the question she didn't want to ask. Does Adrian know anything? Marcus let out a short laugh. No. But this time, it didn't sound as confident. Back in the apartment, Adrian stood alone in the living room. Lights off, city glowing through the glass. He had heard enough, seen enough, confirmed enough. Vanessa's distance, Marcus's instability. The cracks weren't just forming, they were spreading, exactly as planned. He picked up his phone and opened a new file. Added notes, patterns, timelines. Every reaction mattered, every shift, every moment of discomfort. Because psychological pressure wasn't about breaking someone instantly. It was about making them unravel themselves, slowly, inevitably. Behind him, the bedroom door remained closed, but the distance between them had never felt smaller, not emotionally, strategically. Because now, Vanessa was starting to feel it. That unease, that loss of control. And Marcus? He was beginning to question things he had never questioned before. Doubt, paranoia, fear. Adrian closed the file and set the phone down. Everything was moving exactly as it should. No rush, no mistakes, just pressure, increasing, unavoidable. And soon, they wouldn't just feel it, they would understand it. Too late. He looked out over the city one more time. Calm, unshaken. Because this was never about revenge. It was about outcome. And the outcome was already decided. They just hadn't reached it yet. But they would, very soon. Something worse was coming. The invitation arrived in a black envelope. Minimalist, elegant, intentional. Vanessa turned it over in her hands, her name embossed in clean silver lettering. The Cole and Whitman Annual Gala. She frowned slightly. That's your firm's event, right? She asked, holding it up. Adrian adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror, his tone casual. It is. You didn't mention it. I didn't think it was important. Vanessa studied him. That answer didn't feel like Adrian. Since when is your biggest networking event of the year not important? Adrian met her gaze through the reflection, a faint pause. Then, since I realized some things matter more than appearances. The words lingered, uncomfortable, unclear. Vanessa forced a small smile. Well, I'm going. I assumed you would. Another beat. Then Adrian added, Marcus will be there too. Her fingers tightened slightly around the envelope. Of course he will, she said lightly. He always is. But something in her voice shifted. Because suddenly, this didn't feel like just another gala. It felt like a stage, and she didn't know the script. The night of the gala. The ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Manhattan's elite moved effortlessly through the space-tailored suits, designer gowns, polished laughter that concealed more than it revealed. Everything looked perfect. That was the point. Vanessa stepped inside, her black silk dress catching the light. The same dress, the same illusion, but tonight, it felt heavier. Marcus was already there, waiting, watching. "You made it," he said, his smile easy but his eyes not. "You sound surprised." "I'm not," he replied, "just distracted." She studied him. "You look tense." Marcus exhaled quietly. "It's been a long week." "That again?" she asked. "You said it was under control." "It is. Too fast. Again." Vanessa's gaze sharpened slightly, because now she was noticing it, the cracks, not just in the situation, in him. "Marcus," she said softly, stepping closer. "If something's wrong." "There isn't," he cut in. A beat. Then he forced a smile. "Relax. Tonight's about appearances, right?" Vanessa hesitated, because that word, appearances, suddenly didn't feel as safe as it used to. Across the room, Adrian stood near the center of the ballroom, speaking with a group of investors. Composed, effortless, in control. But his eyes, they moved, constantly, tracking, observing. Vanessa, Marcus, every interaction, every shift in body language, every flicker of discomfort. Because tonight wasn't just an event, it was execution. One of his colleagues leaned in. "Everything set for the presentation?" Adrian nodded. "Perfectly." "Good," the man said. "This could change everything." Adrian allowed a small, measured smile. "It already has." The first crack. It started subtly, a conversation near the bar, two men speaking in low voices. Marcus caught fragments as he passed by. Internal review, federal interest, client exposure. He slowed, just slightly. Not enough to draw attention, but enough to listen. "Hale's firm is involved." Marcus's stomach tightened. He kept walking, didn't react, didn't turn. But the words followed him. Louder now, closer. Because once something entered your awareness, you couldn't unhear it. The second crack. Vanessa stood with a group of colleagues when her phone buzzed. An email. Subject line, urgent. Internal inquiry. Immediate response required. Her breath caught. Just for a second. She opened it, read, froze. Questions about her company's recent campaigns, financial overlaps, partnerships, including Marcus's firm. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't coincidence. This was connected. She looked up instinctively. Across the room, Adrian, watching. Not directly, not obviously, but enough. Enough to make something inside her drop. Marcus found her minutes later. "Did you get the email?" he asked quietly. Vanessa nodded. "What is this?" Marcus shook his head. "I don't know." A lie. And this time she heard it clearly. "You said it was under control." "It was. That doesn't answer my question." Marcus stepped closer, his voice tightening. "Lower your voice." "I'm not the one under investigation," she snapped softly. The words hung between them, sharp, dangerous, because for the first time they weren't aligned. Their illusion required unity, and unity was slipping. The lights dimmed slightly. A soft chime echoed through the ballroom. Attention shifted toward the stage. Adrian stepped forward, calm, measured, untouchable. Vanessa felt her chest tighten. "What is he doing?" she whispered. Marcus didn't answer, because suddenly he wasn't sure. "Good evening," Adrian began, his tone smooth, controlled. The room quieted. "I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Standard, expected, safe. But then I also believe that in a room like this, transparency matters." A subtle shift rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's breath slowed. Marcus's jaw tightened. Something was wrong. "Because trust," Adrian continued, "is the foundation of everything we build professionally and personally." His gaze moved across the room, not landing, but seeing. Without it, everything else is just an illusion. Vanessa's heart skipped. Marcus's pulse spiked, because now they felt it. Not suspicion, not doubt, but certainty. They were being pulled into something, something deliberate, something controlled. Vanessa turned slightly toward Marcus. "He knows," she whispered. Marcus shook his head immediately. "No," but his voice wasn't convincing. "Marcus, it's not possible." But it was. They both knew it. Because suddenly everything made sense. The questions, the silence, the pressure, the timing. Adrian hadn't been absent. He had been watching, waiting, building, and now he was executing. Adrian continued speaking, calm, precise, and sometimes he said, The truth doesn't reveal itself all at once. A pause. Then it surfaces, piece by piece. Vanessa felt her hands go cold. Marcus took a step back. Instinct, survival. But there was nowhere to go, because this wasn't a confrontation, it was a trap, and they had already walked into it. The collapse begins. The screen behind Adrian flickered to life. Data, numbers, names. Not everything, not yet, but enough. Enough to shift the room. Enough to create whispers, questions, doubt. Marcus's name appeared, briefly, subtly, but clearly. Vanessa's breath caught. No, she murmured. Marcus stared at the screen, frozen, because this wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was exposure. Controlled, strategic, unavoidable. Vanessa looked at Adrian, really looked at him, and for the first time she saw the truth. Not the man she thought she knew, not the man she underestimated, but someone else entirely. Someone who had never lost control. Someone who had seen everything, planned everything, and chosen this moment to let it all begin. Marcus whispered under his breath, "We need to leave." But even as he said it, he knew. They were already too late. Because this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of their collapse. And Adrian? He wasn't finished yet. Not even close. Because what came next wouldn't just expose them. It would destroy them. Completely. Irreversibly. Something worse was coming. The silence after the reveal was louder than anything before it. No music, no laughter, no movement. Just whispers. Sharp, spreading, unstoppable. Marcus Hale didn't move. His name still lingered on the screen behind Adrian, buried within financial data that only a trained eye could fully understand, but clear enough to raise one undeniable truth. Something was wrong. And in a room full of powerful people, that was all it took. "What is this?" someone murmured. "Is that Hale's firm?" I heard compliance was already looking into it. The whispers multiplied. Marcus felt them, each one tightening around him like a noose he couldn't see but could no longer ignore. He stepped forward slightly. Adrian. But Adrian didn't look at him, not yet, because control wasn't about reacting, it was about timing. Vanessa stood frozen beside him, her fingers trembling just enough to betray what her face tried to hide. This wasn't part of the illusion. This wasn't something she could rationalize. Her mind raced, trying to rebuild the narrative she had been telling herself for months. He doesn't see me. He doesn't understand. I deserve better. But now none of it made sense, because Adrian had seen everything, understood everything, and said nothing. Until now. Her breath became shallow. "Adrian," she whispered, but her voice didn't reach him, or maybe he chose not to hear it. Adrian stepped slightly to the side. The screen shifted. More data. More clarity. This time there was no ambiguity. Shell accounts, transaction trails, fabricated reporting structures, and Marcus's name not subtle anymore. Central. Exposed. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Phones came out, messages sent, connections activated. Because in Manhattan, reputation didn't collapse slowly. It collapsed instantly. Marcus's voice dropped. "You set me up." That made Adrian look at him. Finally. "No," Adrian said calmly. "You did that yourself." The words landed clean, precise, irrefutable. Two men in dark suits moved through the crowd. Not security, not staff, something else. Marcus saw them, and for the first time fear became real, not theoretical, not distant, immediate. "They're here for you," Adrian said quietly. Marcus's chest tightened. "You think this ends well for you?" Adrian tilted his head slightly. "It already has." The agents approached. "Marcus Hale?" A pause. A moment where everything could still be denied, controlled, spun. But Marcus knew. It was over. "Yes, we need you to come with us." Vanessa's word tilted. Not metaphorically, physically. Because suddenly this wasn't just scandal. This was legal, permanent, unavoidable. "Marcus," she started. But he didn't look at her. Because survival had replaced everything else. Even her. The room had transformed. From elegance to spectacle. From admiration to judgment. Vanessa could feel it, the shift in how people looked at her. Not with curiosity, but with understanding. They knew, or at least enough. The proximity, the partnership, the implication. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Emails, messages, questions. Her company, her colleagues, all asking the same thing. "What did you know?" Vanessa stepped back, then another, her breathing uneven now, because this was the part she hadn't imagined. Not just losing Adrian, but losing everything else. Her position, her reputation, her place. "Did you know?" Adrian's voice cut through everything. Vanessa turned toward him slowly. This time there was no distance left, no illusion to hide behind. What? She asked, though her voice barely held. The transactions, Adrian said. The fraud. A pause. Too long. Too telling. She started, but stopped, because there was no version of the truth that saved her. I didn't want to know, she said finally. Honest. For the first time. Adrian nodded once. I know. That was worse than anger, worse than accusation, because it meant he understood her completely, and still chose to walk away. You could have told me, Vanessa said, her voice cracking now. You could have said something. Adrian looked at her, calm, unshaken. Would it have changed anything? She didn't answer, because they both knew. It wouldn't have. You stopped choosing us a long time ago, Adrian continued. I just stopped interrupting. The words broke something, not loudly, not visibly, but permanently. Vanessa's eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall, because even now, she didn't know how to feel what she had lost, only what she had become. Marcus was already gone, escorted out, surrounded, finished. His career over, his name tainted, his future uncertain. And Vanessa? She stood in the middle of a room that no longer welcomed her, phones still watching, people still whispering, doors already closing. Her phone buzzed again, this time an email from her company. Her hand lowered slowly, because now there was nothing left to hold on to. Not Marcus, not her career, not her image, not even the version of herself she had believed in. Only the truth, and the consequences that came with it. Adrian picked up his coat. No rush, no hesitation, no need for a final word, because everything that needed to be said already had been. Vanessa looked at him, really looked, for the last time. Adrian, he paused, but didn't turn around. I didn't think you'd... She struggled for words. I didn't think you'd do this. Adrian's voice was quiet. I didn't think you would either. That was it. No anger, no closure, just truth. He walked away, through the crowd, through the whispers, through the collapse he had orchestrated without ever raising his voice. And as he stepped outside, the night air felt different, lighter, cleaner, free. Inside, Vanessa stood alone, not physically, but completely, because everything that had defined her was gone. Not taken, not stolen, lost, by her own choices. And for the first time she understood. Not regret, not yet, but something deeper. Shame. The kind that didn't fade, didn't soften, didn't leave. Because it wasn't about losing Adrian. It was about losing herself. Adrian walked down the empty Manhattan street, the city still alive around him, but no longer overwhelming. His steps were steady, measured, certain. He didn't look back. Because there was nothing left behind worth returning to. He hadn't won loudly, he hadn't fought publicly, he hadn't lost control. And yet, he had taken everything back. Not from them, but for himself. Clarity, dignity, freedom. And somewhere behind him, two people who once believed they were untouchable were left with nothing but the consequences of what they had chosen. Irreversible, unforgiving, complete. This time, nothing worse was coming.